They say some towns never die, they just fall asleep waiting for someone foolish enough to wake them. Hollow Creek was one of those towns. Hidden deep beyond the forest line, it wasn't on any map. The road that led there wasn't paved, and the few who remembered it swore the path itself moved, like it didn't want to be found. No one went searching for Hollow Creek anymore. Not after what happened in 1972. On a cold autumn evening, a man named Raymond Carter drove down that road. He said his car's GPS had glitched, guiding him off the main highway. He should have turned back when the radio began to lose signal. He should have stopped when the fog swallowed the headlights. But curiosity, that's how it always begins. Hollow Creek feeds on it. Raymond said the forest grew denser with every mile. The trees looked wrong, too tall, too close together, like a wall of wood and shadow. The air smelled like rain and rot. Then he saw the sign, "Welcome to Hollow Creek." The paint was faded, the wood cracked. But beneath the moss, the letters still glowed faintly as if they had been written in something that refused to fade. When he crossed that sign, his engine coughed once and died. Total silence. The kind of silence that screams. The fog seemed to breathe. Raymond got out, trying to call for help, but there was no signal. He walked a few steps forward and felt the ground change. The dirt under his boots wasn't just wet. It was soft, like it was breathing. Then came the whisper. Oh, drawn out. Almost kind. It said his name. He turned around, expecting someone, but there was no one there. Just fog in those endless trees. The voice came again, this time from behind him, closer. Raymond, it dragged the word like the wind was trying to speak. He ran back to the car, slammed the door, and tried to start the engine again. Nothing. Just the sound of something tapping on the window. 3 slow taps. Then silence. Raymond told the police later, or at least that's what the report said, that he saw a figure in the fog. A woman wearing white, her face hidden behind long wet hair. She didn't move like a person. She floated. He said she looked sad, not angry, and she whispered one word before vanishing. The officers wrote it down but never spoke it out loud. The report ended with one line. The driver claims the town appeared deserted. All clocks stopped at 3:15 a.m. Raymond was found wandering the woods 2 days later, barefoot and pale. His car was gone. When they asked where he had been, he just whispered, "They don't sleep there." That was the last anyone saw of Hollow Creek for 40 years. But strange things began happening again. Whispers in the wind, shadows behind trees, and lights moving in the fog. The road appeared again on a few new GPS systems. And those who followed it never came back. They say if you listen closely after midnight, you can still hear the lost ones whispering your name. Because Hollow Creek doesn't let go. Remembers, and sometimes it calls you home. People say Hollow Creek was built on cursed land. But no one really knows when the curse began or who brought it. Some say it started with the old bridge at the town's edge, the one that crosses a dry, cracked riverbed. Others say it began with the house that still stands beside that bridge, half-eaten by moss and shadow. The locals called it the Mercer house. The Mercer family were the last to leave Hollow Creek before it fell silent. Or maybe they never really left at all. No one could agree. The few who claimed to pass through the town said the Mercer house still looked like alive, lights in the windows, curtains moving like someone was watching. But when they went closer, the door was always open and the inside smelled like the air before a storm. Raymond Carter reached that house the night he arrived. His flashlight flickered as he crossed the bridge. Beneath him, the water wasn't water. It was black, thick and still. The surface rippled once, as if something underneath had turned over in its sleep. He didn't look down again. He said the sound that came from below wasn't water moving. It was breathing. When he reached the door of the Mercer house, it opened by itself. A faint, warm light glowed inside. Not candlelight, something stranger, softer, like fireflies trapped behind the walls. He stepped in, calling out, "Hello? Anyone here?" His voice echoed like it was swallowed by the house. The walls were covered with pictures, dozens of them. Families smiling, children standing in fields, old portraits, faces staring at him from another century. But every eye in those pictures had been scratched out, every smile cut through with a knife. He turned to leave, but the door was gone. Where it had been, there was now just a wall, the same wallpaper, the same pictures. The house had sealed him inside. Then came the whisper again, soft, gentle, near his ear. "Stay." The light flickered and dimmed. The air grew cold enough to sting his lungs. A faint humming started from somewhere upstairs, like a lullaby being sung through cracked lips. Raymond froze. Every instinct told him to run, but his body wouldn't move. He lifted his flashlight, trembling, and the beam caught a shadow at the end of the hall. A tall woman, dressed in a long white gown. Her head tilted, her hair dripping wet. She wasn't facing him. Yet somehow he knew she was smiling. Raymond whispered, "Who are you?" The woman's head turned slowly, impossibly far, until her face came into view, pale, hollow, and rotting around the mouth. Her lips didn't move, but her voice came all the same. "They buried me before I was dead." Then silence. The next thing Raymond remembered was waking up outside, lying on the bridge. The sun was rising, the fog had thinned, and the entire Mercer house was gone. But when he looked at the ground beneath him, there were footprints. Bare, wet, and leading back into the forest. He followed them for a few steps before he saw something carved into the bridge rail. "If you hear your name, don't answer." Long before the silence took Hollow Creek, the town had a church, small, wooden, and built on the highest hill. Its bell tower could be seen from every corner of the valley. Folks said the bell had a beautiful sound, pure and deep, like a heartbeat calling the faithful home. But when the curse came, the bell began to ring on its own. No one touched it, no wind moved it, and every time it rang, someone died. The church still stands there today, leaning, broken, its roof torn away by years of storms. But the bell remains blackened by smoke, cracked down the middle, yet still hanging like it's waiting to sing again. The strangest thing, people say, is that it rings only for outsiders, never for the ones already claimed by Hollow Creek. When Raymond Carter left the bridge that morning, he thought the worst was behind him. He was wrong. He walked uphill, following a dirt path covered in roots and bones of fallen leaves. That's when he heard one long hollow note echoing across the trees. The bell. It rang 3 times, slowly. Each strike made the ground tremble, and the fog seemed to pulse with the sound. Birds fled from the trees, though he saw no sky for them to reach. He didn't know why, but the bell felt alive, as if it was warning something, that he had arrived. Raymond reached the church gates by noon. They hung crooked, rusted through, yet swung open as he approached. The graveyard behind them was full of nameless stones. Some graves were freshly disturbed, as though the earth never stopped breathing. A few had names scratched out, but one still remained clear under a layer of moss. Evelyn Mercer, 1874? He stared at it for a long time. The date never ended. Inside, the church was colder than the air outside. Dust floated like tiny ghosts in the sunbeams that slipped through the cracks. Every pew was covered in cobwebs, and at the altar lay a Bible open, untouched. The pages had turned yellow, but the ink of one verse glowed faintly, written by hand. "The living may forget. The dead never do." Then the bell rang again, louder, longer, and closer. The sound didn't come from above. It came from beneath the floorboards. Raymond knelt down, pressing his ear to the ground. The wood vibrated like something was moving below, something heavy, dragging chains. Then he heard a whisper carried through the cracks. "Ring it back, free us." He stepped back as one of the boards splintered. A cold hand reached through, gray, thin, and trembling. Another followed, clawing at the wood. Raymond screamed and stumbled toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The bell above him began to ring wildly, faster and faster, until the sound became unbearable. He looked up and saw the woman in white, standing in the tower window, head tilted, mouth open in a silent scream. Her hair blew in a wind that didn't exist. And then just as suddenly the bell stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. Raymond fell to his knees, shaking. The whisper came again, soft and near. One more soul for Hollow Creek. When the church door finally opened, he crawled outside. The graves behind him were no longer still. They moved tiny shifts of soil, slow and patient, as if something beneath was waking up. And from far across the fog, another bell began to ring, faint, distant, but answering the first. Hollow Creek was awake again. The townsfolk used to say that Hollow Creek got its name from the river, a black stream that wound around the town like a serpent. The water was strange. It didn't flow like other rivers. It shimmered, thick and dark, moving as if something alive breathed beneath it. No fish ever swam there. No birds drank from it. And every night, when the fog rolled in, a single lantern could be seen floating down its current, glowing faintly, never going out. No one ever saw who lit it. Some said the lantern belonged to a ferryman who guided lost souls across the river when they couldn't find their graves. Others said it was a warning, a light carried by the dead to remind the living to stay away. But the truth was worse. After the church bells fell silent, Raymond Carter wandered toward the river. His mind buzzed with whispers, his breath heavy in the cold mist. The forest seemed to lean closer, trees bending in unnatural ways, like they wanted to listen. When he reached the bank, the air felt colder and heavier, almost wet with sadness. Then he saw it. The lantern. It floated slowly toward him, bobbing just above the surface. Its light wasn't bright, only a pale blue glow, but it painted the fog around him in strange shapes. Raymond called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" No answer. The lantern stopped. The glow grew stronger, spreading through the mist like veins of light. The river began to ripple. Something moved beneath it, large, shifting, with the sound of 1,000 whispers all speaking at once. Raymond stepped back, his boots sinking into the mud. The air filled with a faint scent of burned wood and flowers long dead. Then the whispers changed. They weren't just sounds anymore, they were words. Clear. Familiar. "Help us, Raymond." The voice sounded like his mother's. He froze. His mother had been gone for 10 years. His heart pounded as he leaned closer. "Mom?" The lantern flickered. A hand broke the surface, gray and skeletal, reaching for him. The water boiled around it. Another voice followed, deeper, desperate. "Pull us back." Raymond stumbled, falling onto his knees. The mud clung to him like hands. The lantern's light turned red, glowing so bright it burned through the fog. For a brief moment, he saw faces beneath the surface. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, eyes open, mouths moving, all whispering his name. "Raymond, stay." He screamed, crawling backward, trying to get away. But as soon as he looked up, the river was still again. The lantern floated calmly down the stream, its light dimming to that same soft blue glow. The whispers faded, leaving behind only silence and one faint sound behind him. Footsteps. He turned. The woman in white stood by the tree line, dripping water, her lantern now in her hand. She looked at him, her hollow eyes glowing faintly red, and whispered, "They only take the ones who listen." Raymond ran. He didn't stop until he reached the old road again, his clothes soaked, his body shaking. Behind him, the river was calm. The lantern had vanished. But when he looked down at his hands, he saw something that didn't belong to him, a small brass key, rusted, wet, and carved with the words, "Return what was stolen." That night, Hollow Creek slept quietly. But the river didn't. The lantern floated again, this time against the current. Every cursed town has one building that carries the loudest memories. For Hollow Creek, it was the old schoolhouse. The school sat at the edge of town, its windows broken, its roof leaning like an old spine ready to snap. The playground behind it had silent swings rusted in mid-sway, a slide cracked down the middle, and a merry-go-round that still turned slowly in the wind, even when the air was still. Locals said you could hear children laughing there after dark. But if you listened long enough, the laughter changed. It turned into cries. Raymond Carter found the schoolhouse the next evening. His clothes were still damp, and his eyes had the look of someone who had seen too much. He didn't mean to go there, the fog guided him. Every time he tried to walk back to the road, he ended up facing the same building again. Hollow Creek didn't like letting people leave. I liked teaching them lessons. The front doors were wide open. Inside, the air smelled like chalk and rot. Desks still stood in neat rows, covered in dust. On the blackboard, written in faded white chalk, were the words, "Class dismissed." Raymond walked slowly between the desks. He saw drawings on the walls of stick figures of smiling children holding hands. But every drawing had one thing in common. Each child's hands were colored black. He stopped when he heard a faint giggle coming from the far corner. "Hello?" he said, his voice shaking. No answer. Then another giggle, closer this time. The sound of small feet running across the floorboards. A whisper followed. "Teacher said we can't leave until the bell rings." Raymond turned, shining his flashlight toward the corner. Nothing. Then, from behind one of the desks, a child's voice spoke again. "Do you have the key?" His heart stopped. The brass key, the one he found by the river, was still in his pocket. His hand shook as he pulled it out. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, like a classroom full of unseen children. "Give it back, she's waiting. She wants it before midnight. She never liked the dark." Raymond dropped the key on the desk. It clattered, echoing through the room. Then silence. He waited. The air grew heavy. A faint humming started, the same lullaby he had heard in the Mercer house. The desks began to shake. One by one, the drawings on the wall started to bleed, black ink dripping down, forming shapes, faces, hands reaching out from the paper. Raymond ran for the door, but it slammed shut. The room grew darker. From behind him, dozens of small voices whispered in unison. "Sit down." He turned and saw them. Rows of children sitting at their desks. Pale, hollow-eyed, their skin cracked like old paper. Each one smiled, their teeth small and sharp. The nearest one, a girl with a missing eye, tilted her head and asked, "Do you remember us, Mr. Carter?" He shook his head, backing away. "No, I don't." The girl smiled wider. "Yes, you do. You were our teacher." Then everything went black. When Raymond opened his eyes again, it was morning. The door stood open. The desks were empty. The drawings were clean again. But the brass key was gone. And written on the blackboard in fresh white chalk was a single sentence. One lesson left to learn. As Raymond stepped outside, he heard the school bell ring behind him, 3 slow chimes, the same as the church. The whispers returned, soft and close. "Class isn't over, Mr. Carter." He didn't look back. But if he had, he would have seen the children standing at the window watching him leave, smiling with teeth too sharp for children. Every town has a story about a man who saw too much. In Hollow Creek, they called him the Watcher. No one remembered his real name. Some said he had been the sheriff before the curse began. Others claimed he was the last man buried alive in the town graveyard. But one thing everyone agreed on was that he never slept. Not even for a second. They said you could see him standing by the crossroads at night, his lantern glowing faintly, his eyes open wide, like glass marbles catching the moonlight. He never blinked. He never spoke. And if you ever looked directly into his eyes, you'd forget your own name. That was the man Raymond Carter met next. After leaving the schoolhouse, Raymond wandered through Hollow Creek's empty streets. The fog hung low, hugging the ground. Every window he passed was shattered. Every house leaned like it was tired of standing. The town was silent except for the sound of wind, and somewhere far away, a faint ticking. Tick, tick, tick. He followed the sound until he reached an old clock tower at the center of town. Its hands were frozen at 3:15 a.m., the same time written in his police report. Beneath it stood a man holding a lantern, He wore a long coat, torn and covered in dust, and a hat that shadowed most of his face. Raymond called out, "Hey, sir, can you help me?" The man didn't move. The lantern flickered. The ticking grew louder. "Sir?" Raymond said again, stepping closer. The man finally turned his head. His eyes were wide open, white and lifeless, yet somehow burning with awareness. His mouth opened slightly and his voice came out dry, cracked, like old paper tearing. "You shouldn't be here." Raymond froze. "Please, I just want to leave. Tell me the way out." The man tilted his head, the lantern light casting strange shadows across his hollow cheeks. "No one leaves Hollow Creek. Not until she stops ringing the bell." Raymond's voice trembled. "Oh, the woman?" The man nodded once. "She made a promise long ago. To keep the dead from sleeping. To watch. To listen. That's why I don't sleep." The ticking grew louder still. Raymond looked around and realized it wasn't coming from the tower anymore. It was coming from inside the man. With every tick, his neck twitched slightly, like a puppet string being pulled. Raymond stepped back. "What are you?" The man smiled faintly, his teeth black and broken. "I am the time she forgot." The lantern light began to dim. The man leaned forward, whispering now, his breath cold enough to frost the air. "When you sleep tonight, she will come. She always does. Don't let her whisper your name. If she does." He paused. The ticking stopped. "You'll never wake up." Then the man's head dropped forward and the lantern went out. Raymond's flashlight flickered once, twice, and when it steadied, the man was gone. Only the sound of ticking remained, fading into the fog. Raymond fell to his knees. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold his light. He didn't notice until later that his wristwatch, one he hadn't checked since arriving, had also stopped. 3:15 a.m. That night, when Raymond finally closed his eyes, he heard her voice again, soft, singing, and impossibly close. Raymond, time to sleep. He woke up screaming. But when he looked around, he wasn't in the town anymore. He was lying in a bed inside a room he didn't recognize. The wallpaper was old and peeling. A clock ticked softly beside him. And from the corner of the room, he saw her standing there, the woman in white. Her eyes glowed faintly red. She smiled. And then the clock stopped. When Raymond Carter opened his eyes again, daylight poured through the cracked windows. For a moment he believed he'd escaped. But Hollow Creek doesn't let go that easily. It only changes shape. He was lying in a bed with iron bars, the kind found in old motels. The room was dusty, the air thick with the smell of old fabric and mold. A faded wooden sign by the door read, "Room 12, Hollow Creek Inn." He didn't remember walking there. He didn't remember sleeping. The clock beside his bed was frozen at 3:15 a.m. Again. Raymond sat up slowly, his throat dry, his heart pounding. The blanket covering him was damp, cold like it had been pulled from a river. He called out, "Hello?" His voice bounced off the walls. No one answered. Then he saw it in the mirror. It stood opposite the bed, tall and cracked down the center, framed with rusted metal. Its surface shimmered strangely like water in moonlight. Raymond stared at his reflection. For a moment it looked normal, tired, pale, but human. Then his reflection blinked. He didn't. He stepped closer, breath fogging the glass. The reflection smiled faintly. Raymond did not. His chest tightened. "What do you want?" he whispered. The reflection tilted its head and spoke in his voice, calm, quiet, and far too certain. "She's almost here." Raymond stumbled back, the mirror trembling slightly as if something moved behind it. He turned toward the door, grabbed the handle, but it didn't budge. Locked from the outside. He slammed it, shouting for help, but all that answered was the echo of his own voice. Then the mirror began to hum. A soft, low tone that crawled through the air. The reflection changed. The room inside the mirror was no longer the same. The wallpaper was gone. The walls were black. And standing in that mirrored version of room 12 was the woman in white. Her reflection moved closer, even though she wasn't in the real room. The cracks across the mirror widened, spreading like veins. Her voice filled the air. "You brought the key back. But you haven't unlocked the door." Raymond clutched his head, his thoughts spinning. "What door? What are you talking about?" The woman pressed her palm against the inside of the glass. A faint red light glowed beneath it. "The one that keeps them inside. The one under the water." The mirror pulsed with a heartbeat. Raymond could feel it in his chest. Then from behind him he heard footsteps, slow, dragging, and wet. He turned around, the flashlight trembling. The door to room 12 creaked open by itself. No one stood there. But something moved in the hall, a shadow that crawled instead of walked. A whisper came from the doorway, deep and rough. "Don't look at her again." Raymond turned back toward the mirror. His reflection was gone. Only darkness remained until a hand reached out from inside the glass. It touched the surface once. The mirror shattered, but the sound was wrong. It didn't sound like glass. It sounded like screaming. Raymond covered his ears and fell to the floor. The light flickered, the air burned cold, and when it all stopped, the mirror was whole again. But it no longer showed his reflection. It showed the river. And floating in the center of that black water was the lantern. On the mirror's surface, written in fog, appeared new words. "You're running out of time." Raymond looked around. The clock beside him ticked once, then stopped again at 3:15. They say Hollow Creek breathes, that the air itself moves with the rhythm of a sleeping beast. But what most people never knew was that the sound wasn't coming from the trees or the river or the wind. It came from beneath the town. When Raymond Carter awoke again, he was still in room 12. The mirror was quiet, but the floorboards were not. A faint scratching came from underneath, soft, steady, like fingernails dragging across wood. He told himself it was rats. It was always rats in places like this. But rats don't whisper. He held his breath and listened. There was a low voice, almost a sigh, forming words that made the air turn cold. "Raymond, you left us here." He stood up, the flashlight beam trembling across the floor. The sound followed him wherever he stepped, like something crawling below his feet. When he reached the center of the room, the boards dipped slightly and then something knocked. 3 times. Slow. Deliberate. Raymond knelt, his hands shaking. "Who's there?" he asked. The whisper answered, closer now. "You know who." He pulled the small knife from his pocket and pried at the edge of one of the boards. It lifted easily. The smell that came out was unbearable, damp earth and something sweet like rotting flowers. Beneath the floor, a hollow space stretched out, a tunnel lined with bricks that glistened wet in the light. The whisper echoed through it, almost singing now. "She waits below. She never sleeps." Raymond lowered his flashlight. Something moved down there. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just waiting. He saw fabric white and soaked brushing against the dirt walls. Then a face appeared in the darkness, eyes open, skin gray and glistening. The mouth moved but no sound came out. Then another face beside it. And another. Dozens of them, pressed together under the floor like they had been buried alive, whispering through the cracks in their teeth. Raymond stumbled back, his flashlight falling from his hand. The light rolled toward the bed, casting shadows that danced like reaching hands. The whispers grew louder. "Set us free. Bring it back. Return what was taken." The boards began to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. The sound of breathing filled the entire room, deep and ragged. Raymond screamed, slamming the floorboard shut and jumping onto the bed. The noise stopped. Total silence. He sat there for a long time, gasping for breath, until he realized the whisper hadn't gone silent. It had only moved. It was behind him. A cold hand touched his shoulder. He turned but no one was there. Only the mirror. And in that mirror, he saw his reflection again, but this time, it wasn't alone. Standing directly behind him in the reflection was the woman in white. Her hands rested gently on his shoulders. Her face was close enough that he could see the black water dripping from her lips. She leaned in and whispered, "You buried me under your classroom, Mr. Carter?" The mirror cracked once more. The lights went out. The name Evelyn Mercer had followed Raymond since the day he drove into Hollow Creek. It was carved into gravestones, whispered by the children, and spoken by the dead woman in the mirror. But who she really was, that was the question no one alive could answer. When dawn came again, if it was really dawn, Raymond found himself sitting on the edge of the bed in room 12. The fog outside had thickened to the point where even the window looked painted over. The clock still read 3:15 a.m. He didn't remember sleeping. He didn't remember dreaming. But on the bedside table lay something that hadn't been there before. A book. Small, leather-bound, edges burned. The cover was marked with the initials EM. He touched it carefully. The leather was warm like skin. He opened it. The handwriting inside was beautiful but uneven, ink smudged by tears or rain. October 12, 1872. He promised the bell would stop. He lied. It rings even when no one touches it. It calls to the children at night. They walk to it in their sleep. I tried to hold them back, but the sound is inside their heads now. The creek has begun to glow again. Something under it moves when the moon is high. Raymond flipped the page, his hands trembling. October 19, 1872. They want me to finish the ritual. I told them no. But they said the town would die if I refused. Maybe it's already dead. I can hear the river whispering my name. I think I will go to the bridge tonight. If I don't come back, tell Father I forgive him. The next page was blank. Then, near the end of the diary, a final entry appeared, the ink darker, fresher, as if it had been written hours ago. She's here. The one who watches time. He keeps the bell ringing so they never rest. I can't let him win. If anyone finds this, bury me under the schoolhouse. Lock the floor. Don't let them dig me up. The handwriting stopped there. But beneath it, in shaky, newer writing written in black ash, were 4 more words. You already did, Raymond. He dropped the book. His heartbeat echoed in his ears. The diary slid off the table and landed face down on the floor, opening to a torn page. There was a small photograph tucked inside, an old, faded image of a group of children standing outside the Hollow Creek schoolhouse. At the edge of the photo stood their teacher. Raymond's breath caught. It couldn't be. He was barely 40. The photo had to be over 100 years old. But the face had the same jawline, the same eyes. It was him. From the hallway came the creak of a door slowly opening. Footsteps. Slow, bare dragging. He looked toward the door, but instead of footsteps, he heard something else. A faint ringing. The bell tower. Again. The sound rolled through the town like thunder underwater. The walls trembled. The light flickered. The diary pages began to turn on their own, fluttering until they stopped at the last entry again. The ink began to smear, rearranging itself into new words. The river remembers. The teacher returns. Then a knock on the door. 1, 2, 3. Raymond stood frozen. The air pressed heavy on his chest. A child's voice spoke from the other side. It's time for class, Mr. Carter. Raymond's fingers tightened around the edge of the bed. The voice outside the door was small, sweet but wrong. It sounded like a child, yes, but it carried something else beneath it. A deeper echo, like 2 voices speaking at once. Mr. Carter, the voice said again. We're waiting. He didn't answer. He didn't move. The silence stretched. Then came another voice. Then another. Soon there were several, a dozen at least, all whispering, all calling his name. Mr. Carter. It's time for class. We missed you. He looked at the mirror. In it, the door behind him was open. But in the real room, it was still shut. The children's reflections stood in a single row. Their faces pale, their eyes black as wet coal. Some held books. Some held candles that dripped wax down their fingers. They smiled. Not cruelly. Just empty. The smallest one, a girl with one braid over her shoulder, stepped forward in the reflection. She held something in her hands. A small, rusted bell. She rang it. The sound didn't come from the mirror. It came from beneath the floor. He shook the room. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air turned cold enough that Raymond's breath became fog. He stumbled to the window, pushed it open, and looked outside. The fog had swallowed the entire town. But through it, faint orange lights moved slowly. One by one, figures appeared in the mist. Children. Dozens of them. All walking toward the inn. Raymond backed away. No, this isn't real," he whispered. He turned to the mirror. The children's reflections were gone. Only the woman in white remained, her face half hidden by her dripping hair, her fingers brushing the glass. "You taught them to ring the bell," she said softly. "You told them it would keep me asleep." Raymond shook his head, his voice trembling. "That wasn't me, I wasn't there. You always were." Her voice cracked into a whisper that filled every corner of the room. The mirror went black, and when the glass cleared again he saw the classroom. Dust. A broken chalkboard. And on the floor, a ring of small handprints burned into the wood. Then something changed. The inn's floor began to move. The boards bent upward, creaking and groaning, as if something beneath them was pushing to break free. From under the cracks, a dim yellow glow seeped through like candlelight trapped underground. Then came the sound again. The whispering, the breathing, and finally the laughter. Not loud, not joyful. Just the slow, eerie giggle of a child who knows something you don't. Raymond backed toward the wall. "What do you want from me?" he shouted. The girl's voice came again right behind his ear. "We just want to finish the lesson." He spun around with no one there. But on the bed, the diary lay open again. The ink began to write itself. "Come to the schoolhouse, Raymond. We've been waiting a very long time." The lanterns outside flickered closer, one by one. The footsteps stopped right at the inn's door. Then, bang. The door burst open, and the children walked in. Their faces glowed faintly, their eyes hollow but fixed on him. The girl with the braid stepped forward, holding the rusted bell. She smiled. "Ring it, Mr. Carter. One last time." The children stood perfectly still inside room 12. Their faces were pale and calm, eyes black and wet like polished stone. No one spoke. Only the faint drip of water echoed through the silence. Raymond's throat tightened. He stepped back until his shoulders hit the wall. "Stay away from me," he whispered. The girl with the braid tilted her head. "You already called us," she said. Her voice was soft, almost kind. She lifted the small rusted bell. "You made us promise to come back when the river spoke." Raymond's voice cracked. "I don't know what you're talking about." The other children began to hum a low, trembling sound, like a song half forgotten. The melody filled the room, bending the air, making the floor vibrate beneath his feet. Then the girl began to ring the bell. Once, twice, thrice. Each ring pulsed through the air, shaking the windows. The mirror on the wall began to ripple again, showing not the room, but the river. Beneath the black water, something stirred. A shape. A face. A body. The whispering grew louder. "Evelyn Mercer. Evelyn Mercer." Raymond covered his ears. His memory began to fracture, flashes of images he couldn't explain. A classroom filled with candlelight. A small girl crying as the floorboards shook. A hand ringing the bell again and again while the walls bled with water. A voice shouting, "Seal the doors before she rises." He stumbled backward. "No, I didn't do that. I wasn't there. I'm not." But the mirror didn't lie. The reflection showed him as he once was younger, dressed in black, a teacher's coat soaked in blood and mud. His eyes were empty. The same face. The girl's smile faded. "You tried to save us, Mr. Carter," she said softly. "But you saved yourself instead." The room went black. The air filled with the stench of wet earth and smoke. When the light returned, Raymond was no longer in the inn. He stood inside the Hollow Creek schoolhouse. The desks were still there, some overturned, some burned. Children's drawings clung to the walls, their colors faded by decades of dust. At the front of the room sat the same bell. Untouched. Waiting. The girl appeared at the door, the other children behind her. "You must finish it," she whispered, "or it will keep ringing forever." Raymond stepped forward slowly. "Finish what?" The floorboards groaned beneath his boots. From below, the whispering started again, dozens of voices calling, crying, begging. "Let us rest. Set her free." The girl placed the bell in his hand. It was colder than it should have been. And then, from behind the teacher's desk, a figure rose. Evelyn Mercer. Her hair hung in strings of black. Water dripped from her torn dress. Her eyes glowed faintly with white light, yet her face looked calm too. She walked toward Raymond, her bare feet leaving wet prints on the wood. "You sealed the river that night," she whispered. "You bound me there, thinking it would save them." He shook his head. "I didn't know." "You knew." She stepped closer until she stood inches away. Her breath was cold mist. "Ring it once more and it will all end. But if you refuse, the town will never sleep." Raymond looked at the bell in his trembling hand. It vibrated slightly as though alive. He turned toward the window. Outside, the fog pulsed like a heartbeat. The sound of the river echoed faintly, whispering his name. Then the children began to chant again. "Ring it, ring it, ring it." Raymond's tears fell silently. His hand rose. The bell shook. But before he could ring it, Evelyn grabbed his wrist. Her voice dropped into a whisper colder than death itself. "If you ring it, you'll join us." The flame in the lanterns flickered out. Darkness swallowed the schoolhouse. And the bell rang once. Whispers of Hollow Creek, the town that refused to die. The bell's sound rippled through Hollow Creek like thunder from the grave. One single ring, low, mournful, and endless. It rolled through the fog, through the trees, through the bones of every building still standing. Raymond felt it travel through his chest like a heartbeat that wasn't his own. The lanterns inside the schoolhouse flickered back to life, though no flame burned in them. Their glow was pale blue ghost light. The children stood silent now. Every one of them looked at him with black, empty eyes. Their lips moved in unison. "She wakes." The floorboards began to crack open. The smell of rot filled the air, heavy and wet. Raymond stumbled back, clutching the bell, his body shaking. "What's happening?" he shouted. The girl with the braid looked at him sadly. "You called her name." A low rumble came from beneath the ground. The walls of the old schoolhouse began to shiver, dust falling from the ceiling like ash. Then came the sound water. It slithered beneath the floorboards, seeping upward through the cracks, cold and black as ink. The whispering grew louder, hundreds of voices, weeping, pleading, and singing all at once. Raymond fell to his knees, clutching his ears. "Make it stop." But the voices didn't stop. They answered. "You sealed her under the river. You promised us she would sleep. You lied, teacher." The water broke through the wood, rising around him. It crawled up his boots, his knees, his chest freezing, heavy, alive. He dropped the bell. It sank into the dark flood. Evelyn Mercer stood at the front of the room, half in shadow, her white dress now black with river mud. Her eyes glowed brighter than before. "The river remembers," she said softly. "You cannot run from what you buried." The children began to walk forward, their feet sinking into the water but never breaking its surface. They surrounded Raymond, their faces calm, emotionless. The girl reached out and touched his arm. Her hand was colder than the water itself. "It's time to come home," she whispered. He looked around desperately for a way out, but the windows showed only fog, thick, shifting, alive with moving shapes. The bell tower in the distance rang again, even though no one stood inside it. The whole town seemed to breathe. The whispering turned into one word repeated endlessly, overlapping until it became a roar. "Mercy, mercy, mercy." Evelyn raised her hand. The water surged upward, swallowing desks, books, and walls. The entire schoolhouse seemed to drown. Raymond gasped for air, clawing his way toward the door. He pushed it open and stumbled outside into what should have been dry ground. But the street of Hollow Creek was gone. Only the river remained. It stretched endlessly through what had once been the town, reflecting the faint glow of a blood-red moon. Buildings floated like wrecks. The inn, the church, the bridge all half sunk beneath the black water. In the distance, something massive moved under the surface. A ripple. A shadow. Then an eye. Huge. White. Watching. Raymond screamed. "Evelyn, please. I didn't mean to." She stepped out of the schoolhouse door, her bare feet not sinking into the river. "You can't undo what you began," she said. "But you can finish it." He looked down. The bell floated beside him. The girl's voice echoed again. "Ring it and let it take you." Raymond's shaking hand reached for the bell, the same one he had rung a century ago. His reflection shimmered in the water, but it wasn't his face anymore. It was hers. And as his fingers closed around the cold metal, the water whispered once more. "You can't save her. You are her." The bell rang, and the river opened. The sound of the bell echoed forever. It didn't fade. It spread. The water that swallowed Hollow Creek began to glow faintly at first, then brighter, until the whole town shimmered like liquid moonlight. The shapes beneath the surface moved faster now, circling, rising, reaching. Raymond clung to the broken schoolhouse door, struggling to breathe. The water wasn't drowning him, but it wanted to. It slid down his throat like smoke, seeping under his skin, filling him with memories that weren't his. He closed his eyes, and then he saw it all. He was standing in the same classroom, but it was alive again, warm light from the windows, chalk on the blackboard, the children laughing. The bell sat on his desk, new and shining. The year was 1872. Evelyn Mercer stood by the window, her hands folded, smiling softly as the students played. Her voice was kind, calm yet weary. "Mr. Carter, you should rest," she said. "You've been up every night fixing that old clock." Raymond, or someone who looked just like him, smiled faintly. "I can't sleep," he replied. "Not while the river's acting strange. It's louder than before." Evelyn turned toward him. "You still hear it too?" The bell on the desk trembled. Both of them froze. The laughter stopped. The sunlight dimmed. And outside the window the river began to boil. Children screamed as the ground shook. The bell rang once by itself, loud enough to make the walls crack. Evelyn tried to run, but the floor split beneath her. Water burst upward, dragging her down in seconds. Raymond reached for her hand, but instead of pulling her out, he sealed the floor with the bell. The sound of her screams drowned beneath it. And the river went silent again. Raymond gasped, snapping back to the present. The truth hit him like ice. He wasn't a stranger. He wasn't an outsider who stumbled into Hollow Creek. He was the teacher who buried her. He had been running from that night for lifetimes, each time waking, forgetting, returning to the same cursed town. The woman in white appeared beside him on the river's surface, Evelyn Mercer. Her face pale and hollow but filled with a sorrow deeper than hate. "You remember now," she whispered. He stared at her, shaking. "Why am I still here?" "Because you never set me free." The river below them began to churn again. The faces of the drowned children appeared one by one beneath the surface, their mouths open, their voices whispering the same words over and over. "Finish the ringing." Raymond looked at the bell in his hand. It pulsed with light, the same faint blue glow as the lanterns. His tears fell into the water and vanished instantly. He knelt, clutching the bell to his chest. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know what would happen." Evelyn's expression softened. The river forgives, but it never forgets. She reached out, her cold hand touching his face. "You buried me to protect them, now bury yourself to free them." The water beneath him opened like a mouth. He felt it pulling him down, gentle, inevitable. He looked up one last time at Evelyn. "Will it end if I go?" She nodded slowly. "Only if you don't come back." The river's pull tightened. Raymond closed his eyes, the bell still clutched in his hands, and let himself sink. The last thing he saw was Evelyn's face glowing brighter, her eyes filled not with rage but peace. And then silence. The fog lifted. The lanterns faded. The water stilled. Hollow Creek was quiet again. But deep beneath the river, the bell rested on the sand beside two sets of bones, one large, one small. And from the darkness below, a whisper escaped the water. Lesson complete. The clock in the old inn ticked for the first time in 100 years. 3:16 a.m. For 40 years, Hollow Creek was silent. No one lived there. No one dared to. The fog came and went with the seasons, curling around the dead trees and rotted buildings like a memory refusing to fade. The old schoolhouse leaned sideways, half sunk in the soft mud near the riverbank. The bell tower stood crooked but whole, its rusted frame gleaming faintly beneath the moon. No one had heard the bell since that night. Until now. Emily Hargrove had never heard of Hollow Creek. She was a traveler, a photographer of forgotten places, drawn to ruins and lost towns. The locals at the last gas station had warned her not to go there. They said the place wasn't right, that the air was too still, that nothing grew. But Emily didn't believe in ghost stories. She believed in proof. The old road leading to the town was barely visible, overgrown with weeds and cracked asphalt. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, the sun had already vanished behind a curtain of fog. Her car stalled once. Then again. She decided to walk. The silence was heavy, thick enough to hear her own heartbeat. Even the crickets refused to sing. When she finally saw the wooden sign at the edge of town, she almost laughed. "Welcome to Hollow Creek, home of the falls." The letters were warped, half-burned, but still legible. Someone had scratched another line beneath it, written by hand in black paint. "Don't listen when it rings." Emily raised her camera and took a picture. The flash lit up the fog for just a second, and in that second she saw something standing in the distance. A figure. Still watching. She lowered the camera, but it was gone. The main street was mostly rubble. Windows broken. Doors missing. The inn stood crooked but somehow untouched, its sign still swinging weakly from a rusted chain. She pushed the door open. Inside smelled like dust and cold rain. The front desk was covered in old newspapers and candles melted into the wood. She set her camera on the counter and clicked the record. "October 3rd, she said softly. "Exploring Hollow Creek. The whole town looks like it's been underwater. Floors warped, ceilings caved in. No signs of life." Her voice echoed faintly through the hall. Then something answered. A single knock. She froze. "Hello?" No reply. She turned the camera toward the hallway. A small door at the end of the corridor was open with just a little sliver of black between the shadows. She walked toward it slowly. Room 12. The air grew colder with every step. When she reached the door, she pushed it open. The hinges creaked softly. Inside, the room was exactly as it had been left, bed unmade, mirror cracked, clock frozen at 3:15 a.m. Emily lifted her camera and took another photo. The flash burst, and this time when the light faded, she saw it. In the mirror. A face. A man's face. Pale. What? Watching her from the glass. She stumbled back, the camera slipping from her hand and hitting the floor. The mirror began to hum a low, steady tone. Then she heard it. The bell. Faint. Distant. Ringing from somewhere beyond the fog. Once. Twice. The sound rolled through the town like thunder. Emily backed toward the door, whispering, "No, that's not possible." But then, behind her, a small voice spoke, a voice that didn't belong to her world. "Class is starting, Miss Hargrove." She turned slowly. The girl with the braids stood in the doorway. Her skin pale, her eyes black as night. And next to her stood the teacher, Raymond Carter. His face calm, his voice gentle. "Welcome to Hollow Creek," he said. "We've been waiting for you." The bell rang a third time. The camera light flickered. And the fog swallowed the town whole. The fog rolled over Hollow Creek like a tide returning to claim what was once its own. The air grew thick, the moon vanished behind a wall of gray, and the sound of the bell continued to echo across the drowned town, slowly, steady, alive. Dong, dong, dong. Emily Hargrove stood frozen in room 12, her camera light flickering wildly. Before her, the man and the girl waited silent, motionless, their eyes glinting faintly in the darkness. She tried to move, but her feet refused to obey. Her voice trembled. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly, his soaked coat dripping black water onto the floor. "You don't remember yet," he said. "You will." Emily's pulse quickened. "Remember what?" The girl stepped closer, the bell clutched in her small, pale hands. Her eyes met Emily's, deep, hollow, endless. "Everyone forgets," she whispered. "Until it's time to teach again." The mirror on the wall began to tremble. Cracks spread across the glass like veins, revealing flashes of the river-black waves moving beneath moonlight. The whispering began once more. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. Weeping, singing, calling. Ring it. Ring it. Ring it again. Emily stumbled backward until her shoulders hit the wall. Her breath came in short gasps. "This isn't real," she muttered. "It's just an illusion." The man's eyes softened. "That's what I said too." The mirror's surface darkened completely. And then, in the reflection, Emily saw something impossible. A classroom. Children seated at wooden desks, heads bowed, hands folded. At the front of the room stood her. Not as she was now, but older, weary, eyes full of sorrow. A teacher. A woman bound to Hollow Creek. Evelyn Mercer. The realization struck like lightning. Emily gasped, clutching the edge of the bed. "No, I'm not her, I'm not." But the girl nodded slowly. "You were." The bell rang again. The floorboards split open. Water poured upward, swallowing the room, crawling across the ceiling like liquid shadow. The air filled with the smell of rot and rain. Emily screamed as the cold flooded over her, dragging her down. The voices of the children rose in unison. "Lesson complete. Lesson begins." The girl smiled one last time. "Welcome back, Miss Mercer." And everything went dark. Morning came to Hollow Creek. The fog cleared just enough to reveal the town again, still and quiet. The inn stood empty, its door swinging gently in the breeze. Room 12 was dry. The mirror was clean. On the table, a small diary rested open, its last page rewritten in fresh ink. October 3rd. A new class has begun. The river remembers. And on the last line, written faintly in water-stained letters, "The bell will always ring at 3:15. That night, miles away on the old highway, a truck driver slowed his rig near the edge of the forest. Through the fog, he thought he saw lanterns glowing along the riverbank, dozens of them floating silently. And for a moment he swore he heard the faintest sound. A bell. Ringing. He rolled up his window and drove faster, whispering a silent prayer to no one. Behind him, the town of Hollow Creek disappeared once more into the mist. Waiting. Listening. Teaching. Forever. The fog had thinned that morning, but the silence still ruled Hollow Creek. No birds. No wind. Only the smell of damp wood and the faint echo of something that once was human. A man named Thomas Cade stumbled through the overgrown road, his boots crunching over gravel. He wasn't supposed to be there, no one ever was. Thomas was a writer chasing ghost stories, searching for inspiration. The locals in Fairview had whispered about Hollow Creek for years, saying it eats its visitors. He didn't believe them. Not until he saw the sign. "Welcome to Hollow Creek, home of the falls." He stared at the burned wood, tracing the words with his fingers. Beneath it, that strange message still remained written in black, half-faded paint. "Don't listen when it rings." Thomas took a photo and laughed under his breath. Creepy touch. But something about the air felt heavier here, like the whole forest was holding its breath. As he reached the town's edge, he saw the inn standing alone in the mist. Its roof sagged, windows shattered, but the front door was open as if waiting. He stepped inside. The smell hit first mold, dust, and something faintly sweet like rotten flowers. Then he saw it. A camera lying near the counter, covered in dirt and ash. Beside it, an old journal with pages warped by moisture. He knelt and brushed it clean. The first few pages were blank, but one word was carved deep into the leather cover. "Emily." Thomas frowned. Someone else made it here. He turned the first page and froze. The handwriting was trembling but neat. October 3rd. Exploring Hollow Creek. The whole town looks like it's been underwater. Floors warped, ceilings caved in. No signs of life. The ink ended there. But on the next page something different appeared. Not written in pen. Scratched into the paper itself. "They're not gone. They're waiting for the lesson to begin." He turned another page. A faint handprint stained the bottom, small, childlike, pressed in black ash. Thomas swallowed hard. This isn't right. Then the camera beeped. Its red light blinked once. Twice. And a video began to play. The image was dark, but the sound was clear. A woman's voice, shaky, whispering, "If anyone finds this, don't ring the bell. Please." It doesn't stop ringing after that. A crash followed, then the sound of rushing water. The clip ended abruptly, leaving only static. Thomas's hand trembled as he lowered the camera. He stared at the ceiling. From somewhere above him a faint thud echoed. Then another. Like footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming down the stairs. He called out, "Hello?" No answer. He raised his flashlight, the beam cutting through the fog that drifted through the broken windows. At the bottom of the staircase stood a little girl. Her hair in a braid. Her dress soaked in black water. And in her small hand, a brass bell. She tilted her head slightly. "You shouldn't be here, mister." Thomas stumbled back, knocking over the journal. "What is this place?" She smiled faintly. "Class is almost starting." And with that, the bell rang once. Ding. The sound rolled through the inn like thunder. The air turned cold. And the whispering began again. Dozens of voices, calling his name. "Thomas? Stay. Don't leave." He turned to run, but the fog had already filled the doorway. Behind him, the girl whispered softly, "You found her book. That means you're next." The bell rang again, and Hollow Creek welcomed its newest lesson. The sound of the bell echoed long after it stopped. Thomas froze where he stood, the chill in his spine spreading through his whole body. The girl with the braid didn't move. She just watched him, her wide eyes reflecting the flicker of his flashlight. "Why did you come here?" she asked softly. Her voice was neither angry nor kind, only hollow. Thomas swallowed hard. "I was just passing through. I didn't mean to." The girl raised the bell. Its brass surface glistened like it was still wet. "Nobody ever means to," she whispered. "But when the bell rings, it remembers." He stared at her, not understanding. "What does that mean?" She tilted her head again, the motion slow and eerie. "It keeps him asleep." Thomas took a step back. "Who keeps who sleeps?" The girl blinked. For the first time, her lips trembled almost like fear. "The one in the river." He didn't want to stay, but the door behind him was gone. The fog pressed against the windows like something alive. He turned toward the stairs, but the boards creaked beneath his feet, too slow, too deliberate. The whispering started again. Not from outside. From underneath. It came from the floor. From beneath the inn itself. Thomas crouched down, pressing his ear to the wooden planks. And he heard a voice, deep and gurgling, like it was rising through water. "Let me in." He jumped back, heart hammering. The girl didn't flinch. She only watched the floor, her expression sad. "He wakes when the bell stops ringing," she said. "So we keep it ringing." Her fingers tightened around the bell handle. She looked at Thomas with eyes too old for her small face. "You'll help us now." He shook his head quickly. "No. No, I'm leaving." "You can't." Her voice was sharper now, her tone full of certainty, not cruelty, just truth. "You touched the book. That means you belong to Hollow Creek." Thomas stared at her, chest tightening. "What are you?" She turned slightly toward the mirror that hung crooked on the wall. Her reflection didn't move. It stood still, smiling faintly while she remained expressionless. "I'm the bell ringer," she said quietly. "I keep him sleeping. I keep everyone safe." The bell in her hand gleamed brighter now, as if it were made of something more than metal. When she rang it again, the sound wasn't just heard, it shook the air. The walls groaned. The floorboards rattled. And through the cracks between the boards, water began to seep up, black and thick as oil. "He's listening," the girl whispered. "We have to start the lesson before he wakes." Thomas backed toward the stairs. "No lesson, no." But then, from the far side of the room, another voice joined hers. A man's voice, is calm, deep, and near. "Mr. Cade," it said. "Take your seat." Thomas turned slowly. Standing in the shadowed doorway was the teacher, Raymond Carter. Soaked. Still wearing his old suit. His eyes hollow. "Class begins now," Carter said gently. "We've been waiting for a new story." And before Thomas could speak, the bell rang a third time. The fog outside turned black. The river began to roar. and the whispers rose to a scream. The air in the inn thickened, heavy as drowning water. The bell's final note hung in the silence, stretching into something deeper, a pulse beneath the earth. Thomas couldn't breathe. His flashlight flickered, the beam breaking apart through the fog. Raymond Carter stood near the window, still and silent, watching the mist curl through the broken glass. The girl clutched her bell tightly, staring toward the floor where the water was now rising in slow, dark ripples. "He's moving again," she whispered. Thomas stumbled backward. "Oh, what's moving?" Carter turned his hollow eyes toward him. "The river remembers, Mr. Cade. Every name it takes, it keeps." The words made no sense, but something in the tone, quiet, certain, froze Thomas where he stood. "The river of Hollow Creek isn't water anymore," Carter continued. "It's a grave, a book, a voice." He stepped closer. Each footstep left a wet print on the floor. "Every soul that comes here ends up written in its current form. The river calls them back." "You heard it, didn't you?" Thomas shook his head, trembling. "I just heard voices, whispering my name." "Exactly." The girl lifted the bell again, but this time she didn't ring it. She looked at Thomas with eyes full of sadness. "It's trying to remember you." They led him outside. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing what the town truly was: bones of buildings half buried in mud, their windows black and lifeless. The air smelled like rotten metal. In the distance, beyond the cracked road, the sound of rushing water echoed. The river. Thomas followed them, half against his will, half entranced as the current came into view. It was wider than he expected, slow and dark, moving like something breathing instead of flowing. The closer he got, the louder the whispering became. Not just voices. Names. Evelyn Mercer. Sarah Lorne. Daniel Graves. Emily Hargrove. He stopped cold. "That's her name," he muttered. "Emily. The one who had the journal." The girl nodded once. "She stayed too long." Thomas stared into the river. As the moonlight flickered through the fog, he saw something moving beneath the surface. Not fish, not waves, but faces. Human faces. Dozens. Hundreds. Eyes open. Mouths whispering. Each one repeating a name over and over again. "Thomas Cade. Thomas Cade." He stumbled backward, gasping. "No. That's not me, I'm still alive." Carter's expression didn't change. "You are now. But soon the river will remember you too." The girl looked down at her bell, her voice trembling. "I don't want to forget. It punishes the ones who try to leave." Thomas's panic gave way to anger. "Then why stay here? Why keep the bell ringing? Why not stop it?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Because if it stops," she pointed to the water. Something massive moved beneath the surface, long, black, and sinuous. The river itself seemed to ripple outward, as if something ancient was shifting just beneath the mud. "He wakes." Thomas fell to his knees, staring at the river in horror. The whispers grew louder, rising into screams. The water churned violently, and a shape began to rise, a form too big to belong to a human, its outline pulsing like a heartbeat. The bell rang again. Ding. The water stilled. The whispers faded. The girl lowered the bell, her small hands shaking. "Not yet," she whispered. "He almost remembered you." Thomas looked at her, breath ragged. "What is he?" "He's the one who built this town," Carter said quietly, "and the one who refuses to let it die." The river gurgled again, softly this time, almost like laughter. Thomas stared into it, unable to look away. He could see his reflection in the black water. And behind it, something smiled. The fog thickened again that night, rolling over Hollow Creek like a living thing. Thomas sat near the edge of the river, staring into its black surface as the moon fought to shine through the mist. His reflection rippled, bending and twisting, until it no longer looked like him. The girl and the teacher stood behind him. Neither spoke. The bell hung from her hand, quiet but trembling as if the metal itself feared silence. Finally, Thomas broke the stillness. "Tell me what he is," he whispered. "Tell me what's buried here." Raymond Carter's hollow voice carried softly over the water. "He isn't buried, Mr. Cade. He is the ground you stand on." Thomas turned slowly, his pulse hammering. "What do you mean?" Carter looked toward the town, his eyes distant, lost somewhere in memory. Before Hollow Creek was a town, it was a ritual site. A gathering place for those who thought they could control death. They called themselves the Order of the Eternal Lesson. The girl closed her eyes, whispering along with him like a story she had told 1,000 times. They believed that death was only ignorance, that if a soul was taught long enough, it could learn to live forever. Thomas shook his head. "That's insane." "It was," Carter said. "But they didn't stop. They built the school, the homes, the church all around the river. They said the river carried knowledge, that its current flowed between worlds." He turned to face Thomas fully. "They sacrificed the first teacher to the river, the one who taught them. He drowned, but his mind didn't fade. The river took him, fed on him, became him." Thomas's throat went dry. "The one in the river?" "Yes." The girl lifted her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "He still teaches. He never stopped." The wind picked up, swirling through the trees. The fog bent and twisted like hands reaching from the dark. Thomas stepped closer to the water's edge despite the chill crawling up his spine. He saw faint lights below the surface, dozens of them, like lanterns floating beneath the mud. "Those are souls," Carter said. "Students. Every traveler who comes here joins the lesson. Every one of them is remembered by the river." Thomas's breath came in sharp bursts. "And if the bell stops? Then the lesson ends," the girl said softly. "And he wakes to begin again. But he doesn't teach anymore." Carter looked at her with something like sorrow. "He consumes." The river began to ripple. Softly at first, then violently, the black surface breaking apart in waves. A sound rose from below, not a whisper, not a voice. A chant. Low, rhythmic, endless. "Learn. Remember. Repeat." The girl's hands shook as she raised the bell. "He's stirring again. He doesn't want a new teacher." Thomas stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Then what does he want?" The girl looked at him. Her eyes glistened with tears. "You." The river surged upward. The black water wrapped around Thomas's boots like fingers, pulling him closer. He struggled to step back, but the mud gripped his feet. Carter shouted, "Ring it! Ring the bell." The girl tried, but the handle slipped from her hands. The bell fell into the river and vanished with a hiss. For a single heartbeat, the world went silent. Then the water erupted. A massive shape rose from the depths, not flesh, not spirit, but something in between. Its form was smoke and bone, its face shifting endlessly between those it had consumed. Emily, Evelyn, dozens of others, all screaming. Thomas fell backward, clawing at the dirt. The voice from the river thundered inside his skull. The lesson must continue. He screamed, covering his ears, but the words were already inside him, burning, echoing. He saw flashes of the schoolhouse, the drowned children, Evelyn Mercer's eyes, and the sound of the bell. Always the bell. Then, through the chaos, he heard the girl whisper, "If the bell is gone, someone has to take its place." She looked at Thomas. "You have to ring it." And before he could protest, she stepped into the water. The current swallowed her whole. The moment her body vanished beneath the surface, the sound returned, faint at first, then clear. Ding. The bell rang from below the river. The water stilled. The fog retreated. The whispering faded into silence. Raymond Carter lowered his head. Another lesson begins. And Thomas Cade realized too late that the little girl had taken his place. He was the bell ringer now. Morning never truly came to Hollow Creek. The fog thinned just enough to show the outlines of broken rooftops and skeletal trees, but the sun never broke through. The world stayed gray, hollow, and still, like the town had forgotten what light was. Thomas Cade stood at the edge of the river, the wind brushing against his soaked clothes. He hadn't spoken for hours. He didn't need to. The whispers had gone quiet. The water was still again. The bell no longer rang from beneath the current, but somehow, Thomas could still feel its sound vibrating through the air, as if it now lived inside him. Raymond Carter stood beside him, his eyes darker than ever. "It's done," he said softly. "The lesson will continue." Thomas turned slowly. His voice came out weak, hollow. She's gone because of me." Carter's face didn't change. He looked toward the fog. "No one is gone in Hollow Creek. They only change roles." Thomas looked down at the water again. Beneath the black surface, something faint shimmered, the shape of the girl, still holding the bell, her braid floating in slow motion beneath the surface. Her lips moved soundlessly. "Keep teaching." He walked through the town in silence. The buildings leaned as they always had, the air thick with rot and sorrow. The inn door hung crookedly, the same words still carved on the wall behind the counter. "Don't listen when it rings." Thomas sat in the corner room where Emily's camera still lay shattered. He picked up her journal. The last entry glowed faintly as if the ink were fresh. October 4th. A new bell ringer has taken the seat. The river is calm again. The lesson continues. He stared at the page for a long time, the truth pressing down on him like a weight he could never lift. He understood it now. Every soul that found Hollow Creek became part of its story. Evelyn had taught. Emily had searched. The girl had rung the bell. And now he was their replacement. Night came quickly. The fog returned, curling between the buildings like smoke from an unseen fire. Thomas walked toward the old schoolhouse, the only structure still standing tall. Its windows were shattered, its bell tower cracked. But at the top, the brass bell gleamed faintly beneath the moon. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath his weight. At the top, the wind howled through the open arch. The bell swayed slightly, though no rope was attached. He touched it. Cold. Heavy. And when his hand met the metal, a voice echoed through the empty town, not loud, not deep, but familiar. "Ring it, Mr. Cade." It was Carter. Standing below. Watching. Thomas hesitated for only a second. Then he gripped the edge of the bell and pulled. Ding. The sound rolled through the valley, through the trees, across the dead town. The fog froze midair. The ground trembled. And then silence. Miles away, on the same lonely road that led into the woods, a woman's car engine sputtered to a stop. She cursed under her breath, glancing at the old wooden sign just visible through the fog. "Welcome to Hollow Creek, home of the falls." She stepped out, shivering. The air felt colder here. Too still. From deep within the fog, a faint sound drifted toward her. Ding. She froze. "Hello?" she called out. No answer. Only another sound, faint, rhythmic, endless. Ding. 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 She stared toward the sound, her breath trembling. And then she saw the glow of a single lantern near the riverbank. A man stood there, half hidden by the fog. Tall. A shadow holding something round and shining. A bell. When she blinked, he was gone. But the sound remained. Ding. 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 The river whispered softly beneath the mist, countless voices rising together in one endless murmur. Lesson begins.